I stood frozen, my Bible feeling heavy in my hands. I had just witnessed something that shook me to my core.
Mark and Linda, two members of his congregation, were writhing on the floor. Their voices were distorted, their eyes rolled back in their heads.
I've always been a man of unwavering faith, believing in the power of prayer and the sanctity of Scripture. But this was different. This was something I couldn't explain away with a verse or a sermon.
The church elders were in shock. Some whispered about demonic possession, their faces pale with fear. Pastor Hayes tried to rationalize what he was seeing. Maybe it was a medical episode, a seizure of some sort. But deep down, a part of him knew. This was something else entirely.
The room was filled with a palpable tension. Fear and uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. As the shepherd of my flock, I felt utterly lost. My carefully constructed world of faith and reason was crumbling around me.
Pastor Hayes had been raised on a strict interpretation of the Bible. Demons and possessions were things of the past, relics of a less enlightened time. Or so he had always believed. Now, faced with the undeniable reality before him, he felt a crack in the foundation of his faith.
I retreated to my study, the weight of tradition heavy on my shoulders. I pored over the scriptures, searching for answers, for guidance. I found passages about spiritual warfare, about the reality of the demonic, but my years of preaching a different narrative made it difficult to reconcile these verses with my worldview.
Doubt crept into his heart, a relentless whisper against the certainty he had always known. He had built his life, his ministry, on the bedrock of his beliefs. Now, that bedrock was crumbling, and he was left grappling with the possibility that everything he thought he knew might be wrong. The weight of his congregation's expectations pressed down on him. They looked to him for answers, for spiritual guidance. But how could he lead them when he himself was lost in a labyrinth of doubt and fear? Word of Mark and Linda's episode spread through the congregation like wildfire. It wasn't long before every corner of the community buzzed with whispers and speculations. The once serene and composed church was now a hotbed of rumors and fear. The church, once a beacon of unity and tradition, became a battleground of conflicting beliefs. Members who had prayed together for years now found themselves on opposite sides of a growing chasm. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of community was rapidly disintegrating. Some saw it as a sign, a manifestation of the supernatural in their midst. They believed that divine or demonic forces were at play, interpreting the events as a test of faith or a warning from beyond. Others dismissed it as hysteria, a mass delusion fueled by fear and superstition. They clung to rational explanations, convinced that there was a logical reason behind the strange occurrences.
The church elders, bound by years of rigid doctrine, refused to acknowledge the possibility of demonic influence. Their faces were stern, their minds closed to anything that deviated from their long-held beliefs. They urged me to quell the growing unrest, to reassert the primacy of reason and traditional biblical interpretation. They believed that by reinforcing the familiar teachings, the congregation would find solace and stability once more.
But Pastor Hayes found himself torn. He was a man of faith, but also a man who had witnessed something inexplicable. He couldn't deny the truth of what he had witnessed. The raw fear in Mark and Linda's eyes, the distorted voices that seemed to claw their way out of their throats. These were not figments of imagination. They were real, and they were terrifying. The raw fear in Mark and Linda's eyes, the distorted voices that seemed to claw their way out of their throats. These were not figments of imagination. The couple's terror was palpable, and it left an indelible mark on Pastor Hayes. But neither could he reconcile this reality with the doctrines he had preached for so long. His faith was being tested in ways he had never imagined, and he struggled to find a path forward.
The church, once a source of comfort and guidance, now felt like a cage, its bars forged from fear and dogma. The familiar surroundings now seemed oppressive, and the weight of expectation was almost unbearable. The congregation, once united by faith, was now fractured by doubt and suspicion. The sense of community that had been their strength was now their greatest weakness, as fear and uncertainty took hold. As the shepherd entrusted with their spiritual well-being, I felt powerless to mend the growing rift. The responsibility weighed heavily on my shoulders, and I wondered if I had the strength to guide them through this crisis.
Section 4. The price of rejection. Mark and Linda's abandoned hope. This chapter delves into the emotional and spiritual journey of a couple who face the harsh consequences of stepping outside the accepted norms of their religious community.
Mark and Linda, ostracized and terrified, found themselves at a crossroads. Their once secure place within the church community had become a source of fear and uncertainty. In their desperation, they sought help beyond the confines of their church. They ventured into unfamiliar territory, hoping to find the support and understanding they desperately needed. They found solace in a small group of believers who practiced deliverance ministry, a practice that offered them a glimmer of hope and a sense of belonging. This ministry, however, was shunned by Pastor Hayes and the church elders as fanatical and extreme. The couple's choice to engage with this group was seen as a direct challenge to the established norms.
Pastor Hayes, bound by his fear of the unknown and the pressure from the church elders, found himself in a difficult position. He was torn between his duty to uphold church traditions and his compassion for Mark and Linda. Ultimately, he refused to condone their choice. His decision was not just a rejection of their actions, but a reinforcement of the boundaries that defined his authority. He saw it as a betrayal, a rejection of his authority and the traditions he represented. This perceived betrayal only deepened the rift between him and the couple. He warned them against straying from the accepted doctrine, emphasizing the dangers of deviating from the path laid out by the church. But his words felt hollow even to his own ears. He struggled with the realization that his rigid stance might be causing more harm than good.
As Mark and Linda found healing and peace outside the walls of the church, they began to rebuild their lives. They discovered new ways to connect with their faith and each other. Meanwhile, Pastor Hayes felt a growing emptiness within himself. He questioned whether his adherence to doctrine had come at the expense of his compassion and humanity. He had chosen doctrine over compassion, fear over faith. This internal conflict gnawed at him, making him question the very foundations of his beliefs. In doing so, he had failed his parishioners in their time of greatest need. His inability to adapt and show empathy had left a void in the community.
The consequences of his decision were far-reaching. The ripple effect of his actions spread through the community, affecting not just Mark and Linda, but many others who looked to the church for guidance and support. Mark and Linda, once active members of the church, felt abandoned and betrayed. Their sense of belonging was shattered, leaving them to question their place in the world. Their faith, once a source of strength and comfort, became tainted by the judgment and rejection they experienced from those they had trusted most. This chapter serves as a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between faith, compassion, and the human need for acceptance. Section 5. Chains of Doctrine. When belief overrides truth. Pastor Hayes' struggle is a stark reminder of the dangers of allowing doctrine to overshadow truth. His journey is not just a personal battle, but a reflection of a larger issue within many religious communities. When our beliefs become rigid and inflexible, they can blind us to the reality of the spiritual world, both its beauty and its darkness. This rigidity can prevent us from experiencing the full spectrum of spiritual growth and understanding. We become prisoners of our own making, trapped within the walls of our limited understanding. These self-imposed barriers can stifle our spiritual journey, keeping us from exploring new dimensions of faith and enlightenment. The Bible, often used as a weapon to silence dissent and enforce conformity, is meant to be a source of liberation and enlightenment. It is a text that should inspire us to seek truth and understanding, not to bind us to a single interpretation. It speaks of a God who is beyond our comprehension, a God who works in ways we cannot always understand. This divine mystery invites us to embrace the unknown and to trust in a higher power that transcends human logic. To confine God to the limitations of our human doctrines is to deny the immensity of His power and the depth of His love. We must remember that our understanding is but a small glimpse of the divine reality. When we elevate doctrine above personal experience and spiritual intuition, we risk creating a faith that is sterile and lifeless. A faith that does not breathe, that does not grow, is a faith that cannot sustain us in times of trial. We become so focused on defending our interpretations, on maintaining the status quo, that we forget the heart of the matter, a personal relationship with the divine. This relationship is the cornerstone of true faith, a connection that goes beyond words and doctrines. The chains of doctrine, while seemingly strong, can never truly bind the human spirit. Our spirit yearns for freedom, for the ability to explore and to grow without the constraints of rigid beliefs. Our hearts yearn for something more, something beyond the confines of dogma and tradition. We seek a faith that is alive, that moves and breathes with us, that evolves as we do. When we allow ourselves to be open to the possibility of the unknown, to embrace the mystery and wonder of the spiritual realm, we open ourselves to a faith that is both liberating and transformative. This openness can lead us to a deeper understanding of the divine, one that is not limited by human constructs but is expansive and all-encompassing. Section 6. The Seeds of Doubt, Questioning the Unquestionable. The incident with Mark and Linda planted a seed of doubt in Pastor Hayes' mind. This seed, nurtured by his inability to reconcile his beliefs with his experience, began to grow, forcing him to confront the limitations of his previously unwavering faith.
Had he been wrong all along? He found himself questioning long-held assumptions, scrutinizing passages he had always accepted at face value. The world of faith, once a landscape of comfortable certainty, now appeared as an uncharted territory, filled with both wonder and trepidation.
The elders, sensing his wavering, urged him to silence his doubts. They reminded him of his responsibilities, of the potential chaos that could erupt if the congregation sensed any uncertainty in their leader. But their words, once a source of comfort, now rang hollow in his ears.
Pastor Hayes realized that true faith required more than blind acceptance. It demanded a willingness to wrestle with doubt, to grapple with the unknown. It was in the crucible of questioning that faith was refined, strengthened, made more resilient. He could no longer, in good conscience, preach a faith he wasn't sure he fully believed in.